He had spoken of wonders and mysteries, but I had not been able to listen to him, for I had been caught in the crossfire between fear and self-importance. I was actually fuming. I was certain that Don Juan had hypnotized me in the park and had then taken me to that lady's house, and that the two of them had done terrible things to me. My fury was interrupted. Something out there in the street was so horrifying, so shocking to me, that my anger stopped instantaneously. But before my thoughts became fully rearranged, Don Juan hit me on my back, and nothing of what had just taken place remained. I found myself back in my blissful, everyday life stupidity, happily listening to Don Juan, worrying about whether or not he liked me. As I was telling Don Juan about the new fragment that I had just remembered, I realized that one of his methods for handling my emotional turmoil was to make me shift into normal awareness. The only thing that soothes those who journey into the unknown is oblivion, he said. What a relief to be in the ordinary world. That day, you accomplished a marvelous feat. The sober thing for me to do was not to let you focus on it at all. Just as you began to really panic, I made you shift into normal awareness. I moved your assemblage point beyond the position where there are no more doubts. There are two such positions for warriors. In one, you have no more doubts because you know everything. In the other, which is normal awareness, you have no doubts because you don't know anything. It was too soon then for you to know what had really happened. But I think the right time to know is now. Looking at that street, you were about to find out where your dreaming position had been. You traveled an enormous distance that day. Don Juan scrutinized me with a mixture of glee and sadness. I was trying my best to keep under control the strange agitation I was feeling. I sensed that something terribly important to me was lost inside my memory. Or, as Don Juan would have put it, inside some unused emanations that at one time had been aligned. My struggle to keep calm proved to be the wrong thing to do. All at once, my knees wobbled and nervous spasms ran through my midsection. I mumbled, unable to voice a question. I had to swallow hard and breathe deeply before I regained my calmness. When we first sat down here to talk, I said that no rational assumptions should interfere with the actions of a seer. He continued in a stern tone. I knew that in order to reclaim what you've done, you'd have to dispense with rationality. But you'd have to do it in the level of awareness you are in now. He explained that I had to understand that rationality is a condition of alignment, merely the result of the position of the assemblage point. He emphasized that I had to understand this when I was in a state of great vulnerability, as I was at that moment. To understand it when my assemblage point had reached the position where there are no doubts was useless, because realizations of that nature are commonplace in that position. It was equally useless to understand it in a state of normal awareness. In that state, such realizations are emotional outbursts that are valid only for as long as the emotion lasts. I've said that you traveled a great distance that day, he said calmly. And I said that because I know it. I was there, remember? I was sweating profusely out of nervousness and anxiety. You traveled because you woke up at a distant, dreaming position, he continued. When Gennaro pulled you across the plaza, right here from this bench, he paved the way for your assemblage point to move from normal awareness all the way to the position where the dreaming body appears. Your dreaming body actually flew over an incredible distance in the blink of an eyelid. Yet that's not the important part. The mystery is in the dreaming position. If it is strong enough to pull you, you can go to the ends of this world or beyond it, just as the old seers did. They disappeared from this world because they woke up at a dreaming position beyond the limits of the known. Your dreaming position that day was in this world, but quite a distance from the city of Oaxaca. How does a journey like that take place? I asked. There is no way of knowing how it is done, he said. Strong emotion, or unbending intent, or great interests serves as a guide. Then the assemblage point gets powerfully fixed at the dreaming position, long enough to drag there all the emanations that are inside the cocoon. Don Juan said then that he had made me see countless times over the years of our association, either in states of normal awareness or in states of heightened awareness. I had seen countless things that I was now beginning to understand in a more coherent fashion. This coherence was not logical or rational, but it clarified nonetheless, in whatever strange way, everything I had done, everything that was done to me, and everything I had seen in all those years with him. He said that now I needed to have one last clarification. The coherent but irrational realization that everything in the world we have learned to perceive is inextricably tied to the position where the assemblage point is located. If the assemblage point is displaced from that position, the world will cease to be what it is to us. Don Juan stated that a displacement of the assemblage point beyond the midline of the cocoon of man makes the entire world we know vanish from our view in one instant, as if it has been erased. For the stability, the substantiality that seems to belong to our perceivable world is just the force of alignment. Certain emanations are routinely aligned because of the fixation of the assemblage point on one specific spot. That is all there is to our world. The soundness of the world is not the mirage, he continued. The mirage is the fixation of the assemblage point on any spot. When seers shift their assemblage points, they are not confronted with an illusion. They are confronted with another world. That new world is as real as the one we are watching now. But the new fixation of their assemblage points, which produces that new world, is as much of a mirage as the old fixation. Take yourself for example. You are now in a state of heightened awareness. Whatever you are capable of doing in such a state is not an illusion. It is as real as the world you will face tomorrow in your daily life. And yet tomorrow, the world you are witnessing now won't exist. It exists only when your assemblage point moves to the particular spot where you are now. He added that the task warriors are faced with after they finish their training is one of integration. In the course of training, warriors, especially Nawal men, are made to shift to as many individual spots as possible. He said that in my case, I had moved to countless positions that I would have to integrate someday into a coherent whole. For instance, if you would shift your assemblage point to a specific position, you'd remember who that lady is. He continued with a strange smile. Your assemblage point has been at that spot hundreds of times. It should be the easiest thing for you to integrate it. As though my recollection depended on his suggestion, I began to have vague memories, feelings of sorts. There was a feeling of boundless affection that seemed to attract me. A most pleasant sweetness filled the air, exactly as if someone had just come up from behind me and poured that scent over me. I even turned around. And then I remembered. She was Carol, the Nawal woman. I had been with her only the day before. How could I have forgotten her? I had an indescribable moment in which I think all the feelings of my psychological repertory ran through my mind. Was it possible, I asked myself, that I had woken up in her house in Tucson, Arizona, 2,000 miles away? And are each of the instances of heightened awareness so isolated that one cannot remember them? Don Juan came to my side and put his arm on my shoulder. He said that he knew exactly how I felt. His benefactor had made him go through a similar experience. And just as he himself was now trying to do with me, his benefactor had tried to do with him, soothe with words. He had appreciated his benefactor's attempt, but he doubted then, as he doubted now, that there is no way to soothe anyone who realizes the journey of the dreaming body. There was no doubt in my mind now. Something in me had traveled the distance between the cities of Oaxaca, Mexico, and Tucson, Arizona. I felt a strange relief, as if I had been purged of guilt at long last. During the years I had spent with Don Juan, I had had lapses of continuity in my memory. My being in Tucson with him on that day was one of those lapses. I remembered not being able to recall how I had gotten to Tucson. I did not pay any attention to it, however. I thought the lapse was the result of my activities with Don Juan. He was always very careful not to arouse my rational suspicions in states of normal awareness. But if suspicions were unavoidable, he always curtly explained them away by suggesting that the nature of our activities fostered serious disparities of memory. I told Don Juan that since both of us had ended up that day in the same place, I wondered whether it was possible for two or more people to wake up at the same dreaming position. Of course, he said. That's the way the old Toltec sorcerers took off into the unknown, in packs. They followed one another. There is no way of knowing how one follows someone else. It's just done. The dreaming body just does it. The presence of another dreamer spurs it to do it. That day, you pulled me with you, and I followed because I wanted to be with you. I had so many questions to ask him, but every one of them seemed superfluous. How is it possible that I didn't remember the Nahual woman? I muttered, and a horrible anguish and longing gripped me. I was trying not to feel sad anymore, but suddenly sadness ripped through me like pain. You still don't remember her, he said. Only when your assemblage point shifts can you recollect her. She is like a phantom to you, and so are you to her. You've seen her once while you were in a normal awareness, but she's never seen you in her normal awareness. To her, you are as much a personage as she is to you, with the difference that you may wake up someday and integrate it all. You may have enough time to do that, but she won't. Her time here is short. I felt like protesting a terrible injustice. I mentally prepared a barrage of objections, but I never voiced them. Don Juan's smile was beaming. His eyes shone with sheer glee and mischief. I had the sensation that he was waiting for my statements because he knew what I was going to say. And that sensation stopped me. Or rather, I did not say anything because my assemblage point had again moved by itself. And I knew then that the Nahual woman could not be pitied for not having time, nor could I rejoice for having it. Don Juan was reading me like a book. He urged me to finish my realization and voice the reason for not feeling sorry or for not rejoicing. I felt for an instant that I knew why, but then I lost the thread. The excitation of having time is equal to the excitation of not having it, he said. It's all the same. To feel sad is not the same as feeling sorry, I said. And I feel terribly sad. Who cares about your sadness? He said. Think only of the mysteries. Mystery is all that matters. We are living beings. We have to die and relinquish our awareness. But if we could change just a tinge of that, what mysteries must await us? What mysteries? Chapter 18. Breaking the barrier of perception. In the late afternoon, still in Oaxaca, Don Juan and I strolled around the square leisurely. As we approached his favorite bench, the people who were sitting there got up and left. We hurried over to it and sat down. "We've come to the end of my explanation of awareness," he said. "And today you are going to assemble another world by yourself and leave all doubts aside forever. There must be no mistake about what you are going to do. Today, from the vantage point of heightened awareness, you are going to make your assemblage point move, and in one instant, you are going to align the emanations of another world. In a few days, when Gennaro and I meet you on a mountaintop, you are going to do the same from the disadvantage of normal awareness. You will have to align the emanations of another world on a moment's notice. If you don't, you will die the death of an average man who falls from a precipice." He was alluding to an act that he would have me perform as the last of his teachings for the right side. The act of jumping from a mountaintop into an abyss. Don Juan stated that warriors ended their training when they were capable of breaking the barrier of perception, unaided, starting from a normal state of awareness. The Nahual led warriors to that threshold, but success was up to the individual. The Nahual merely tested them by continually pushing them to fend for themselves. The only force that can temporarily cancel out alignment is alignment, he continued. You will have to cancel the alignment that keeps you perceiving the world of daily affairs. By intending a new position for your assemblage point, and by intending to keep it fixed there long enough, you will assemble another world and escape this one. The old seers are still defying death to this day by doing just that, intending their assemblage points to remain fixed on positions that place them in any of the 7 worlds. "What will happen if I succeed in aligning another world?" I asked. "You will go to it," he replied, "as Gennaro did, one night in this very place when he was showing you the mystery of alignment." "Where will I be, Don Juan?" "In another world, of course. Where else?" "What about the people around me, and the buildings, and the mountains, and everything else?" "You'll be separated from all that by the very barrier that you have broken, the barrier of perception. And just like the seers who have buried themselves to defy death, you won't be in this world." There was a battle raging inside me as I heard his statements. Some part of me clamored that Don Juan's position was untenable, while another part knew beyond any question that he was right. I asked him what would happen if I moved my assemblage point while I was in the street, in the middle of traffic in Los Angeles. "Los Angeles will vanish like a puff of air," he replied with a serious expression. "But you will remain. That is the mystery I've been trying to explain to you. You've experienced it, but you haven't understood it yet. And today you will." He said that I could not as yet use the boost of the earth to shift into another great band of emanations, but that since I had an imperative need to shift, that need was going to serve me as a launcher. Don Juan looked up at the sky. He stretched his arms above his head as if he had been sitting for too long and was pushing physical weariness out of his body. He commanded me to turn off my internal dialogue and enter into inner silence. Then he stood up and began to walk away from the square. He signaled me to follow him. He took a deserted side street. I recognized it as being the same street where Gennaro had given me his demonstration of alignment. The moment I recollected that, I found myself walking with Don Juan in a place that by then was very familiar to me. A deserted plain with yellow dunes of what seemed to be sulfur. I recalled then that Don Juan had made me perceive that world hundreds of times. I also recalled that beyond the desolate landscape of the dunes, there was another world shining with an exquisite, uniform, pure white light. When Don Juan and I entered into it this time, I sensed that light, which came from every direction, was not an invigorating light, but was so soothing that it gave me the feeling that it was sacred. As that sacred light bathed me, a rational thought exploded in my inner silence. I thought it was quite possible that mystics and saints had made this journey of the assemblage point. They had seen God in the mold of man. They had seen hell in the sulfur dunes. And then they had seen the glory of heaven in the diaphanous light. My rational thought burned out almost immediately under the onslaughts of what I was perceiving. My awareness was taken by a multitude of shapes, figures of men, women, and children of all ages, and other incomprehensible apparitions gleaming with a blinding white light. I saw Don Juan walking by my side, staring at me, and not at the apparitions. But the next instant, I saw him as a ball of luminosity, bobbing up and down a few feet away from me. The ball made an abrupt and frightening movement and came closer to me, and I saw inside it. Don Juan was working his glow of awareness for my benefit. The glow suddenly shone on 4 or 5 thread-like filaments on his left side. It remained fixed there. All my concentration was on it. Something pulled me slowly, as if through a tube, and I saw the allies. 3 dark, long, rigid figures agitated by a tremor, like leaves in a breeze. They were against an almost fluorescent pink background. The moment I focused my eyes on them, they came to where I was. Not walking or gliding or flying, but by pulling themselves along some fibers of whiteness that came out of me. The whiteness was not a light or a glow, but lines that seemed to be drawn with heavy powder chalk. They disintegrated quickly, yet not quickly enough. The Allies were on me before the lines faded away. They crowded me. I became annoyed, and the Allies immediately moved away, as if I had chastised them. I felt sorry for them, and my feelings pulled them back instantly. And they again came and rubbed themselves against me. I saw then something I had seen in the mirror at the stream. The Allies had no inner glow. They had no inner mobility. There was no life in them. And yet they were obviously alive. They were strange, grotesque shapes that resembled zippered up sleeping bags. The thin line in the middle of their elongated shapes made them look as if they had been sewed up. They were not pleasing figures. The sensation that they were totally alien to me, it made me feel uncomfortable, impatient. I saw that the three Allies were moving as if they were jumping up and down. There was a faint glow inside them. The glow grew in intensity until, in at least one of the Allies, it was quite brilliant. The instant I saw that, I was facing a black world. I do not mean that it was dark as night is dark. It was rather that everything around me was pitch black. I looked up at the sky and I could not find light anywhere. The sky was also black and literally covered with lines and irregular circles of various degrees of blackness. The sky looked like a black piece of wood where the grain showed in relief. I looked down at the ground. It was fluffy. It seemed to be made of flakes of agar-agar. They were not dull flakes, but they were not shiny either. It was something in between, which I had never seen in my life. Black agar-agar. I heard then the voice of seeing. It said that my assemblage point had assembled a total world with other great bands of emanations. A black world. I wanted to absorb every word I was hearing. In order to do that, I had to split my concentration. The voice stopped. My eyes became focused again. I was standing with Don Juan just a few blocks away from the square. I instantly felt that I had no time to rest, that it would be useless to indulge in being shocked. I rallied all my strength and asked Don Juan if I had done what he had expected. "You did exactly what you were expected to do," he said reassuringly. "Let's go back to the square and stroll around it one more time, for the last time in this world." I refused to think about Don Juan's leaving, so I asked him about the black world. I had vague recollections of having seen it before. "It's the easiest world to assemble," he said. "And of all you've experienced, only the black world is worth considering. It is the only true alignment of another great band you have ever made. Everything else has been a lateral shift along man's band. but still within the same great band. The wall of fog, the plain with yellow dunes, the world of the apparitions, all are lateral alignments that our assemblage points make as they approach a crucial position. He explained as we walked back to the square that one of the strange qualities of the black world is that it does not have the same emanations that account for time in our world. They are different emanations that produce a different result. Seers that journey into the black world feel that they have been in it for an eternity. But in our world, that turns out to be an instant. The black world is a dreadful world because it ages the body, he said emphatically. I asked him to clarify his statements. He slowed down his pace and looked at me. He reminded me that Gennaro, in his direct way, had tried to point that out to me once, when he told me that we had plotted in hell for an eternity, while not even a minute had passed in the world we know. Don Juan remarked that in his youth he had become obsessed with the black world. He had wondered, in front of his benefactor, about what would happen to him if he went into it and stayed there for a while. But as his benefactor was not given to explanations, he had simply plunged Don Juan into the black world to let him find out for himself. The Nahual Julian's power was so extraordinary, Don Juan continued, that it took me days to come back from that black world. You mean it took you days to return your assemblage point to its normal position, don't you? I asked. Yes, I mean that, he said. He explained that in the few days that he was lost in the black world, he aged at least 10 years, if not more. The emanations inside his cocoon felt the strain of years of solitary struggle. Silvio Manuel was a totally different case. The Nahual Julian also plunged him into the unknown. But Silvio Manuel assembled another world with another set of bands. A world also without the emanations of time, but one which has the opposite effect on seers. He disappeared for 7 years, and yet he felt he had been gone only a moment. To assemble other worlds is not only a matter of practice, but a matter of intent, he continued. And it isn't merely an exercise of bouncing out of those worlds, like being pulled by a rubber band. You see, a seer has to be daring. Once you break the barrier of perception, you don't have to come back to the same place in the world. See what I mean? It slowly dawned on me what he was saying. I had an almost invincible desire to laugh at such a preposterous idea. But before the idea coalesced into a certainty, Don Juan spoke to me and disrupted what I was about to remember. He said that for warriors, the danger of assembling other worlds is that those worlds are as possessive as our world. The force of alignment is such that once the assemblage point breaks away from its normal position, It becomes fixed at other positions by other alignments, and warriors run the risk of getting stranded in inconceivable aloneness. The inquisitive, rational part of me commented that I had seen him in the black world as a ball of luminosity. It was possible, therefore, to be in that world with people. Only if people follow you around by moving their own assemblage points when you move yours, he replied. I shifted mine in order to be with you. Otherwise, you would have been there alone with the allies. We stopped walking, and Don Juan said that it was time for me to go. I want you to bypass all lateral shifts, he said, and go directly to the next total world, the black world. In a couple of days, you'll have to do the same thing by yourself. You won't have time to piddle around. You'll have to do it in order to escape death. He said that breaking the barrier of perception is the culmination of everything seers do. From the moment that barrier is broken, man and his fate take on different meanings for warriors. Because of the transcendental importance of breaking that barrier, the new seers use the act of breaking it as a final test. The test consists of jumping from a mountaintop into an abyss while in a state of normal awareness. If the warrior jumping into the abyss does not erase the daily world and assemble another one before he reaches the bottom, he dies. What you are going to do is make this world vanish, he went on. But you are going to remain somewhat yourself. This is the ultimate bastion of awareness, the one the new seers count on. They know that after they burn with consciousness, they somewhat retain the sense of being themselves. He smiled and pointed to a street that we could see from where we were standing. The street where Gennaro had shown me the mysteries of alignment. That street, like any other, leads to eternity, he said. All you have to do is follow it in total silence. It's time. Go now. Go. He turned around and walked away from me. Gennaro was waiting for him at the corner. Gennaro waved at me and then made a gesture of urging me to come on. Don Juan kept on walking without turning to look. Gennaro joined him. I started to follow them, but I knew that it was wrong. Instead, I went in the opposite direction. The street was dark, lonely, and bleak. I did not indulge in feelings of failure or inadequacy. I walked in inner silence. My assemblage point was moving at great speed. I saw the three allies. The line of their middle made them look as if they were smiling sideways. I felt that I was being frivolous. And then a wind-like force blew the world away. Epilogue. A couple of days later, all the Nawal's party and all the apprentices got together on the flat mountaintop Don Juan had told me about. Don Juan said that each of the apprentices had already said goodbye to everybody, and that all of us were in a state of awareness that admitted no sentimentalism. For us, he said, there was only action. We were warriors in a state of total war. Everyone, with the exception of Don Juan, Gennaro, Pablito, Nestor, and me, moved a short distance away from the flat mountaintop in order to allow Pablito, Nestor, and me privacy to enter into a state of normal awareness. But before we did, Don Juan took us by the arms and walked us around the flat top. In a moment, you're going to intend the movement of your assemblage points, he said, and no one will help you. You are now alone. You must remember then that intent begins with a command. The old seers used to say that if warriors are going to have an internal dialogue, they should have the proper dialogue. For the old seers, that meant a dialogue about sorcery and the enhancement of their self-reflection. For the new seers, it doesn't mean dialogue, but the detached manipulation of intent through sober commands. He said over and over again that the manipulation of intent begins with a command given to oneself. The command is then repeated until it becomes the eagle's command. And then the assemblage point shifts accordingly, the moment warriors reach inner silence. The fact that such a maneuver is possible, he said, is something of the most singular importance to seers, old and new alike, but for reasons diametrically opposed. Knowing about it allowed the old seers to move their assemblage point to inconceivable dreaming positions in the incommensurable unknown. For the new seers, it means refusing to be food. It means escaping the eagle by moving their assemblage points to a particular dreaming position called total freedom. He explained that the old seers discovered that it is possible to move the assemblage point to the limit of the known and keep it fixed there in a state of prime heightened awareness. From that position, they saw the feasibility of slowly shifting their assemblage points permanently to other positions beyond that limit. A stupendous feat, fraught with daring, but lacking sobriety. For they can never retract the movement of their assemblage points. Or perhaps they never wanted to. Don Juan said that adventurous men, faced with the choice of dying in the world of ordinary affairs, or dying in unknown worlds, will unavoidably choose the latter. And that the new seers, realizing that their predecessors had chosen merely to change the locale of their death, came to understand the futility of it all. the futility of struggling to control their fellow men, the futility of assembling other worlds, and above all, the futility of self-importance. One of the most fortunate decisions that the new seers made, he said, was never to allow their assemblage points to move permanently to any position other than heightened awareness. From that position, they actually resolved their dilemma of futility and found out that the solution is not simply to choose an alternate world in which to die, but to choose total consciousness, total freedom. Don Juan commented that by choosing total freedom, the new seers unwittingly continued in the tradition of their predecessors and became the quintessence of the death defiers. He explained that the new seers discovered that if the assemblage point is made to shift constantly to the confines of the unknown, but is made to return to a position at the limit of the known, then, when it is suddenly released, it moves like lightning across the entire cocoon of man, aligning all the emanations inside the cocoon at once. The new seers burn with the force of alignment, Don Juan went on, with the force of will, which they have turned into the force of intent through a life of impeccability. Intent is the alignment of all the amber emanations of awareness. So it is correct to say that total freedom means total awareness. Is that what all of you are going to do, Don Juan? I asked. We most certainly will, if we have sufficient energy, he replied. Freedom is the eagle's gift to man. Unfortunately, very few men understand that all we need in order to accept such a magnificent gift is to have sufficient energy. If that's all we need, then by all means, we must become misers of energy. After that, Don Juan made us enter into a state of normal awareness. At dusk, Pablito, Nestor, and I jumped into the abyss. And Don Juan and the Nahual's party burned with the fire from within. They entered into total awareness, for they had sufficient energy to accept the mind-boggling gift of freedom. Pablito, Nestor, and I didn't die at the bottom of that gorge, and neither did the other apprentices who had jumped at an earlier time, because we never reached it. All of us, under the impact of such a tremendous and incomprehensible act as jumping to our deaths, moved our assemblage points and assembled other worlds. We know now that we were left to remember heightened awareness and to regain the totality of ourselves. And we also know that the more we remember, the more intense our elation, our wondering, but also the greater our doubts, our turmoil. So far, It is as if we were left only to be tantalized by the most far-reaching questions about the nature and the fate of man, until the time when we may have sufficient energy not only to verify everything Don Juan taught us, but also to accept the eagle's gift ourselves. The end.